You've done a great job hosting us, right? Yeah, this has been fantastic. I came in to the conference on Saturday night so I could have 2 days of hiking. So I got to go over to Oregon and did some hiking here in southern Idaho. I went over to Oregon, I did the hike, and I was on some really unique volcanic formations. I got to hike among the clags. Um, that was for you. So anyhow, I was hiking and I see all these free-range cattle, right? We're dealing with manure storages and all that. And how do you quantify and know what where free-range cattle or how their nutrients are getting you know applied across the landscape, etc. And in Pennsylvania, we don't have free-range cattle. We don't even have anything that's free, nor do we have range, right? But then I was going to a trailhead, and I found and discovered how they manage the cattle manure nutrients on the free range. Why didn't it click? You're, I see Greg Zwicky is here. Hi, Greg. This is how they manage the nutrients for these cows. Yeah. So if you ever wondered, if you're not from Idaho, this is how Idaho manages their nutrients for free cows, free range cows. So anyhow, only a knucklehead would come up with a joke like that. All right. Here's our research team. Uh, this is how I want to talk primarily about a paper that was published this spring, earlier this year. This is the list of our authors in order. So you have three people on the team from the USDA: Colton Flynn, Jennifer Yost from Temple, Texas, Sherry Spiegel from New Mexico, Kevin Erb, myself in Extension, Mariah Ayuka was involved as a grad student who did an internship with a group at Temple. Um, so we're going to primarily talk about these first two bullets today. We were enumerating and characterizing manure handling certifications across the United States and investigating if we could find any correlations, how the manure certification programs were, did we see correlation with them, and also looking at the manure shed source characteristics. We also, if you know Kevin Erb, has done a lot of great work for over 2.5, 3 decades in Wisconsin with some surveys, really being in tune with his industry in the state, very organized group in Wisconsin. So we used the data he had for a case study with this. So why is this important? I'm just kind of following part of the proceedings here, right? Outreach and training and education of manure handlers can be a great way to make sure that we're distributing nutrients farm by farm, county by county, state by state, region by region efficiently, right? To date, we have not had a systemic evaluation of state certification programs, and we really wanted to just see what's it look like, right? Nutrient flows, right, from animal dense regions. So we think about that manure shed concept where we have an animal dense region that might have surplus nutrients, perhaps some of your poultry spots in South Carolina, right? How can we have that nutrient flow in a good way? Sometimes we lack that circularity we've talked about a little bit this week, and we have to move some of those nutrients down the road, if you will. We know that fertilizer nutrients, manure nutrients can accumulate in soil and regionally, right? This is a pretty simple statement here in the bottom, but regionally animal dense areas, manure nutrient dense areas can make sense, right? There's reasons why we have hubs of production of swine, of poultry, of dairy, right? Because of a lot of things, not only the crops and the climate, but also things like economic forces, labor specialization, and logistics come into play. And those things help to drive the formation of the manure hauling and handling industry in that region. One slide on the Wisconsin's case study. So a section of our paper, this paper headlined by Colton Flynn, one section that is a nice report. It has a lot of great information on the Wisconsin case study, where that professional organization has a ton of great information. There are several references in the proceedings for waste to worth that also are listed in that paper that you can go to look for. I'm not going to discuss that much further today. More information is in the proceedings here. I kind of wrote the proceedings based on a 20-minute talk. And the 5 minutes that got cut were Wisconsin. What did we do? We did an internet search, right? A pretty big internet search, pretty thorough on what do each state have in place as far as certification for manure haulers and brokers, handlers. Then we followed that up with a survey. We had a Qualtrics survey. We got that distributed through some organizations, through NRCS, through some personal contacts, and we had that completed by all 50 states and codified that data into some nice spreadsheets. So to our knowledge, this was the first survey to capture all 50 states and quantify manure hauler and broker distributions. We distributed, as I said, sometimes we had necessary, follow-up contact. What did you think the hardest state to get was? As far as a return survey, it was Rhode Island. Yeah, we had to send like 75 emails. No, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 emails to people in Rhode Island before we got a really good night's. But we had actual people complete surveys from all 50 states. So that was really cool. We felt really good when that came in. What did we do? Right, we started to look at what do the states do for certification. The definition of certification certainly changes across state lines, but it comes down to almost the simple definition of a legal permission, right? What does the state require somebody to do in order to legally fulfill the application, transport, professional, or brokering of manure? We broke it into these categories of certification. Number 1 were producers. If the farmer is being certified, that's the producer. Number 2 were the transporters or the applicators, the professional manure haulers. 3 were the brokers, so somebody making manure, money off the manure transport, sometimes assuming ownership of that, selling it down the road. There were 2 types of certification. Either mandatory, thou shalt be certified, or volunteer, you may be certified if you would like to be in the program. That makes sense? Yeah, that's what we did. Here's our first map. So, I ran the same problem as you. It looks good here. Okay. You can see that the state lines are always a little blurry. But here's the map. These are also, this is lifted right out of our paper, right? These are the states that have a certification program. So 26 of 50 states have a certification program. What does that look like? Thank you for trying to get that as clear as we could. If you think that's burly, wait till you get done listening to me. Okay, here's another graphic from our paper. So of the 26 states, how does that break out? So first on top, we have the states that have producers that are certified. The green ones are mandatory. The yellow ones are volunteer certification. So you can see when you look at that, I'll use Pennsylvania as an example, right? We have no certification for the producer. We jump down here, the transporters or applicators, the manure haulers themselves are professional haulers. In Pennsylvania, it's mandatory that they're certified. They're in green. You have, again, green or yellow, mandatory versus volunteer. And then the brokers are down here, and in Pennsylvania, were mandatory that a broker is certified. So if you look at that, the producers, right, of 26 states that have a certification program, 21 are certifying producers, 15 mandatory, 6 volunteer. The haulers, 20 out of the 26 are requiring that or have that mandatory for 13, volunteer for 7. Brokers, 10 of the 26 states, 10 of 50 states have a program, 7 mandatory for brokers, 3 volunteer. There's no real pattern, right? Try to look at this and say, what does that look like, right? We were hoping to get that and say, here's a pattern. Here's what states have done. Here's how we've reacted. And we took a spreadsheet. We wrote down every possible category of combination of producer and, producer transporter, producer broker, right? All the possible, and we put X's across with each state. And you looked at the X's, and there just isn't anything solid there as far as pattern goes. However, if you start to think about the states that are certified, have a certification program, and where dense animal populations are, we see some things emerging. This map, the first map here, ties in closely with other manure shed works that we've done, right? The county level here, if it's a brown county, that means they have in the manure shed concept surplus manure nutrients compared to the crops in that county that can assimilate those nutrients. So we expect them to be a nutrient source county, right? If you look at the 26 states that have certification and where those counties are, we see a lot of good overlap. And here is just a map of dairy, hogs, beef, broilers, and turkeys. Again, apologize that it's not coming through clearly. And this is from our current paper, just showing where livestock are located and nutrients are in excess. In the West, right, we see that once we get to Colorado and move to the Western U.S., we don't really have certification. We do have some concentrated animal production areas in the West. A lot of these big counties in the Southwest, are going to have very localized livestock within those counties, but we don't have certification programs there. We do see that the certification do cover a lot of the other counties, right, that have it. And this interesting pattern across Appalachia emerges. If you look at that, right, we just heard Matt talk about South Carolina, where we have a lot of poultry, and he told us it was in that upper, upland area. If you look at this, though, right, we called this in a paper with Ray Bryant in the manure shed systems. We called this area right here the mega manure shed, right? The whole poultry region here in the southeast. But as you move across this hill area, we really don't have many counties with excess nutrients. We have some scattered in there, but you do see a pattern where the lack of certification kind of matches up with the lack of excess manure in those areas. So that was one interesting thing we saw. Certification approaches varied. Some certification pertains to specific areas. So if we look at Arkansas, you might be familiar with their poultry industry lies largely in the western end of the state. They have certification programs where brokers are certified to move. They've had programs to move nutrients to the eastern end of the state that help to facilitate and subsidize movement there. But whenever someone was being paid with that subsidy, they had to be certified. We have Pennsylvania, where certification pertains to the entire state, even though in our state we famously have a large concentration of animals in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. It pertains to the entire state. Another scenario would be Wisconsin, where uniquely their certification is tied to and has geographic and geological ties based on where you are with soil types and how that might pertain. So I'm just going to throw this up in the proceedings. I have these references listed. I didn't talk about all these necessarily. I have this one listed here as under review. It now has been accepted and is published online. Open access for that. Another one of note would be our data, right, is listed here. The NRCS partners with us are not listed here because of just how things were falling out. We've published that in a repository, so you could go and get our data if you want through Wisconsin. So a couple of summary thoughts. 26, oh my gosh, typo. 26 of 50 states have certification. High variation between states. General certification will seem to be put in place to address nutrient imbalances. The Wisconsin study, we didn't talk about a lot today, but if you go to the paper, the proceedings have a little bit of information there. Manure certification can assist states with watershed, manure shed management goals. We feel that multi-state cooperation, standardization, and reciprocity between states with certification could really help. I live in a state where a lot of our animal industry in the southern end of the state works a lot across the state line, across the Mason-Dixon line with Maryland. And the certification in Maryland and certification in Pennsylvania are always a little different and causing a bit of a barrier in nutrient transfer when we should be encouraging nutrient transfer, right? So with that,